Here we go. This is Grandpa Frank here. We're going through the Gospel of John, King James Version, and we are up to chapter 18, doing commentary as we go along. Chapter 18. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Kedron, where was a garden, into the which he entered and his disciples. And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus often resorted thither with his disciples. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, cometh thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, Whom seek ye? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus saith unto them, I am. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with them. As soon then as he had said unto them, I am, they went backwards and fell to the ground. Then asked he them again, Whom seek ye? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I have told you that I am. If therefore ye seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled, which he spake, Of them which thou gavest me have I lost none. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Then said Jesus unto Peter, Put up thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it? Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him, and led him away to Annas first, for he was father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was the high priest that same year. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Okay, so here it is. They are after the Passover meal. They are in the garden, and it's pretty much describing what happened here. So Judas has gone to the Pharisees, the religious leaders. He got a band of men with him, and they're going over to this garden right here because he knew that's where Jesus was going to be. And they're planning to arrest him and take him, which is exactly what happened. But interesting here is that they come and Jesus, instead of hiding, instead of running away, he comes out to them. He meets them at the entrance of the garden and asks, well, who are you looking for? And when he said Jesus, he said, I am. I'm the guy you're looking for. And they all fell backwards. I think that's an interesting little thing to notice. Why or how? I don't know. Maybe just the presence and the power of God could be. And he asked them again a second time, who are you looking for? And Jesus, and they said they're looking for Jesus. And Jesus says, well, I am. So take me, but let these go their way. Because he's protecting his disciples. Okay. And then Peter, being as rambunctious as he is, gets a sword. He had a sword. Now, where he had the sword from, I don't know. But he had a sword, and he swings it, and he chops off the ear of the servant of the high priest. Now, we find out later that Jesus comes and heals him. Okay, I'm just looking right here. It doesn't mention that part right here. But then Jesus is bound, and he's taken away to Caiaphas. Verse 15, Then Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. Then saith the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, Art not thou also one of this man's disciples? He said, I am not. And the servants and officers stood there, who had made a fire of coal, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. Okay, so now Peter and this other disciple go over to the high priest's palace. The other disciple knew the high priest, or the high priest knew him, so he was allowed to go in first. And after he was in, then he was able to go and then bring Peter in. And the gal at the door, the doorkeeper, recognized Peter. Aren't you one of his disciples? And Peter says, no, he denied it. So that's the first denial. Verse 19. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spake openly into the world. I even taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort, and in secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I say. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why smitest thou me? Now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas the high priest. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. They said therefore unto him, Art not thou also one of his disciples? He denied it, and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter cut off, said, Did not I see thee in the garden with him? And Peter then denied him again, and immediately the cock crew. So kind of bouncing back and forth here. So Jesus is being questioned. He's being questioned about his teachings and everything. But Jesus just said plainly, hey, you know what? I was in the synagogue. I was in the temple. Everything that I said openly. You know, if you want to know what I said, ask those who heard me. And so they most likely continue to get people who would do that. Okay, now going back to Peter. Peter was warming himself. Again, it was cold outside, and so another person, someone that were standing in that circle, warming himself by the fire, asked Peter, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" And Peter denied it. And the second person asked, and he denied it again. So 3 times Peter denied it, and then the cock crew, just as the Lord had mentioned. Verse 28. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment. And it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, for that they might not eat the Passover. Pilate then went out into them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up to thee. Then said Pilate unto them, Take ye him, and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Jesus, and said unto him, Art thou the King of the Jews? Jesus answered, Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it of me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore saith unto him, Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth heareth my voice. Pilate said unto him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews, and said unto them, I find in him no fault at all. But ye have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. Will ye therefore that I release unto you the king, the King of the Jews? Now they cried then cried they all again, saying, Not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. Okay, so now Jesus is brought before Pilate. And they come early in the morning. Imagine, early in the morning, waking up the governor. He's probably still in his pajamas when he has to come to the door. And what's all this commotion? Why are you doing it? Why can't you come during business hours? And Pilate asked, well, what has he done? And the religious leader says, well, if he were not a malefactor, would we have brought him? And so he takes him in, he questions him, and inquires and realize this is all, you know, you guys should judge him according to your law. But the Jews replied that, we're not allowed, they're not by law permitted to execute a person. So then Pilate gets a notion, because it's the Passover season, it's a tradition, the last few years at least, to release somebody, to release a prisoner. Well, who shall I release? And they call, shall I release the king of the Jews? And they said no. They called for Pilate, who was a murderer and a robber. And we'll stop right there.